It's live.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Mental Health Staff Hour episode 2. So, thank you very much for the support on the first week. It was really, really well received, and the feedback has been absolutely excellent. So, I really appreciate you sharing it within your organizations, and please do continue to share these episodes coming up. So, today it's all about adapting to change. So, if you are new to the webinars, I am Sam Tyrer. I'm the Prevention and Engagement Lead at Lancashire and South Cumbria Foundation Trust. I'm also the founder of a service called Change Talks, which is basically an educational program which is taught to young people, which aims to prevent ill health. And I'm also the co-host of this show and also the Mental Health Family Hour, which are both very similar. So, Dave.
Hi, I'm Dave. I operate online under the name Mindset by Dave. I am a mindset and mental health coach and educator. I basically produce content for people. I work one-to-one with people. I work in schools with Sam when we're physically able to do so. And obviously, I'm the co-host of this. Today, I will be primarily working as producer, so you won't hear too much from me today. I'll be looking after the chat and just making sure the stream is healthy and up.
It's such a role reversal, isn't it? Because normally I try to get you to do all the talking, but on this it ends up being me.
Well, when we don't have guests,
Yeah.
then you don't have me shut up for an hour.
So is the chat box open straight away, Dave, as well?
Chat box is
Yeah,
open. All I can't. Yeah,
yeah,
it's open
perfect.
already.
Perfect. So if anyone wants to ask any questions, please do put them in the chat box as we go along, and we'll answer them at the end. If anyone wants to email me afterwards, please do email me on sam.tyrer, so that's Tyrer at lscft.nhs.uk. So please do get in contact afterwards. If there's any comments or feedback, I'd really, really appreciate that. So now to introduce our three wonderful guests. So I'm going to start with Karen. Could you just say who you are, please? That'd be fantastic.
Hi everybody, I'm Karen Dawson-Smith. I am the Employee Support Team Leader working for Lancashire County Council.
Perfect. And Helen?
Hiya, I'm Helen Wilkinson. I'm a public health practitioner, also working at Lancashire County Council, and I work very closely with Karen as part of the wider wellbeing team.
Perfect. Joe?
Hi, I'm Jo Smith. I work for the same trust as Sam, and I'm the Health and Wellbeing Strategic Lead, but I'm very much hands-on and very much focused on people and how we can adapt to where we are right now.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Can I ask a question before we get in? We've got someone called Alison. Oh, they've gone. They were in the waiting room. I was going to say, are we expecting an extra guest?
No, we're not.
Okay, cool.
No. Sorry, Alison, but we can bring you on to another episode in the future, I'm sure.
Right, I'm gone now.
Yeah, so basically today is all about adapting to change. And we know over the last 12 months it's been challenging, for many of us, whether you work on the ward and you've been moved different job roles, whether you're working from home. And I think that the first point that I would really like to touch on, as many of us are office-based workers that may be watching this today, many of us have been working from home over the last 12 months, and separating, your work and your home life is difficult. So could anyone of the three of you sort of start to talk about that, and how can we sort of separate work and home life whilst working from home all the time?
I mean, I'm happy to come in on that, Sam, really from a personal perspective. I started working from home nearly 12 months ago, and haven't really been in the office since. My husband had a serious operation, so I was at home anyway, and it just snowballed into being at home. And I suppose we've gone through a little bit of adapting to our circumstances. He also, when he recovered, started to work from home. So I was in the kitchen, he was in the dining room, there was stuff all over the house. We sort of felt like we weren't ever separating work. I was then we got some tables, he moved upstairs to a bedroom, I took the dining room table. I then started to, at the end of my working week, pile everything up and put it in a cupboard so that it wasn't in front of me. I'm very much a person that likes to be around people. I like that contact. So it did feel lonely. It did feel isolating. I've now moved up to a bedroom. So we're both in bedrooms in the house with work all over the place, but at least we can shut the door from it. And I think probably after an amount of time, I've settled with it. And I think that's the point that will sort of come out when we talk today. There's a bit of a transition that you get, in that it feels unusual and unnatural and uncomfortable, but then when you sort of bear with it almost, it sort of settles. and then we get the anxiety of changing again, but that's a natural thing. But personally, I sort of got used to it. I very much value the online forums and being able to sort of see people's faces. And like you were saying before, we were talking about cats and dogs and children and doorbells. That really, we've got a window to a different world now, in a way, by talking through this. So I mean, it still is important that we connect and find ways to connect.
Can I ask Jo before any other speakers come in? So how did you sort of separate work from home then? Because I know personally when I've done days at home, I found that if I'm working in the lounge or the dining room, I feel like I can't switch off because it feels like, oh, I've just done my work here all day. Now it doesn't feel like I'm in a place where I can just switch off from that. It just feels like my mind's constantly in work mode. And how do you separate the two?
I've learned the hard way how to look after my well-being, and I've learned by experience what happens to me if I don't find some boundaries to my working day. So I am quite conscious and self-aware that if I have a start to my day and a finish to my day. I do have a lunch break. I'll fess up. I do watch Bargain Hunt just for half an hour.
Bit of Bargain Hunt.
But it's just that escapism to leave the work. I mean, again, at the end of the day, I always walk. That's my mindfulness. And I think over time, I've learned to train my brain that I must end my day. And now I'm going walking and I will just take notice. That might just be the trees have grown a bit today. The sky's a different colour. But it's taken time to sort of train myself to do that. But if I don't do it, I will suffer that anxiety and that stress and that not sleeping that a lot of people describe. So it's just been perseverance. But like I say, learning that if I don't do something, I suffer. And I don't like that. I really don't like being unhappy and stressed and anxious. So I need to prevent it, if you like.
Yeah. And Helen and Karen, do you want to come in with anything on this?
Yeah, I completely agree with Jo. It's been around about 12 months now since we were sent home and haven't been back into the office since. And it's probably taken me a good proportion of that 12 months just to get used to being at home and working at home and finding out what works for me and figuring out a routine. I mean, initially it was a bit of a honeymoon period because, I was at home, we were on the dining room table, hubby was sat next to me, the teenager was at home and he's doing his A-levels, dogs running around, and you're like, oh, this is great. But that novelty very soon wore off because, hubby, as lovely as he is, has a big boomy voice. And that was really a sort of difficult to deal with when we both had meetings because we both work for Lancashire County Council. So it was a case of, well, you go in there and I'll go in here and you can't speak while I'm doing this and don't make any noise, and who's going to let the dog out. And I think I cracked at Christmas. I managed it for quite some time, and then just after Christmas we were very, very lucky, and I realised that we're very lucky to have a little space that I could call my own, and we cleared out the little front bedroom, which is where I am now. And that's been fantastic because I can shut the door on everything at the end of the day. I leave my laptop in here, my work phone in here. I don't come back in here after I've switched off from work. And then I go and do something else. That morning and evening routine, as Jo said, is incredibly important. And I know that we have staff where they're in very, very challenging roles, dealing with very difficult things. And actually, their home was their sanctuary. And now that's shifted and work is at home. That has been quite challenging for some people. And I really understand that. And having that end of day routine to separate that work life from the home life is really, really important. And as Jo says, whether that's a walk around the block, just going into the garden with a cup of tea, watching, some sort of telly for half an hour. I call it my silly telly, and I'll watch, a dog program, or I'll watch, like Bargain Hunt, or watch something that's really I don't have to think about, and doing something like that for half an hour, or reading my book. It's incredibly important, but that's taken quite some time to get to that point where I'm comfortable with my new routine at home.
Yeah. I'd just like to say as well, we're not actually sponsored by Bargain Hunt, by the way. Karen, is there anything that you'd like to add to that?
I mean, yeah, obviously I can echo the points that Joe and Helen have made there. It didn't take me very long to realise the impact of working at home was going to have on me. Because at the start, we've got a very busy household, very busy family. So we were into lockdown. My husband was working from home full time. My children were here being homeschooled full time. Half the week we had my husband's children here as well. So we very quickly realised that us all thrown together in this one not very big house was going to be problematic. So we quite quickly sort of sat down to work out who was going to do what and how the routine of the house was going to be. So we set in some structure into who was going to do what each day in terms of jobs and things like that, because we started to bicker over who'd emptied the bin. It'd be like sitting down and having a break, which is great. He's taking a break from his PC and he's having his coffee. I'm taking a break and running around doing loads of jobs in the house. So we had to have that discussion and sort out that sort of thing. So the relationship between the two of us, it's having a break. Not only I found your routine around sort of the start and the end of the day is really important. It was novel to be working from home. So actually I can log on in my pajamas. This is great. But actually the effect that has on your mindset isn't that good. So I found to get up and follow the same routines of getting up, getting dressed as if I was going to go to work, and being in that work mode and mindset, setting up the structure for the children with the homeschooling as much as I could reasonably do, and then agreeing whereabouts in the house that my husband and I were going to share the space and who was going to do which jobs as we were all at home and working and doing schoolwork at that time. Just to put some sort of clarity and organisation on that. But also one thing that occurred to me really, really quickly was the unreasonable expectation I placed on myself to be constantly at work. Like from logging on at 7:30 in the morning till 5, 6 o'clock at night, just being constantly available. And then I became obsessed with this like little monitoring thing that we have on Teams and Skype that say if you're available and if you're active. And I thought, well, what are they going to think I'm doing if I'm not available? So, I was like, literally, I would panic if I missed a Skype call or a Teams call or an email and it wasn't responding straight away. And it was almost like I felt I had to account for all my actions because I was at home. And there was almost an element that I placed on myself. It didn't come from anywhere else, but I would be doing something else because I'm at home. I wouldn't be doing my job.
Yeah.
So I very quickly sort of picked up on that. And also in my role where we deal with staff wellbeing. And at first we had not a lot of contact with people. Normally our service is very busy. But we had not a lot of contact with people. It was almost like we were closed for business at the start of lockdown. But as it started to pick up, not only was that thing I was recognising in myself happening to me, but it was also happening to other colleagues across the authority. So we set out a bit of a reflective communication message on that and asked people to reflect back on what they expected of themselves in a typical day of the office, where you might go and make a brew in the breakout room and talk to a colleague for 15 or 20 minutes. Or you could be traveling in your car between meetings for like 30 minutes and you wouldn't be available to respond to that call or that email then, and you wouldn't think twice about it. And that really resonated with a lot of people and enabled them to reflect on how they were working.
Yeah, I quite like to look at this from two perspectives, because you've got those individuals that they're basically putting the pressure on themselves to be constantly available, where actually nobody is monitoring that. But also it'd be good to touch on the fact that there are unfortunately people being micromanaged, and people are checking that, where a manager may be looking at a member of staff, and if they are not online for 5 minutes, they're ringing them saying, "Where are you?" So how, the two questions there is, how does someone deal with this pressure that they're putting on themselves, even though they're not being watched? But also, how does the individual respond to the manager that is watching them? Can I have anyone's input on that? That'd be great.
I would go to say, Sam, I think that's about sort of having healthy conversations about your circumstances and how you like to work. I mean, I've given you, I love the start and an end to a day, but I don't have young children. I'm not juggling other things. I've got older family and sort of grandchildren. That's a different matter. But I think, you know, where Karen's describing a busy household, it could be that you prefer to sign on early, do a bit of this, leave it for a bit, come back to it. It's that flexibility, but knowing that perhaps people's circumstances will differ, but it's the ability to have that open conversation about, this is where I'm at and this is how I need to work. I think that's really important. And I think also, I mean, it's just come to mind, you know, we're talking here about a lot of us that are working from home, you know, with a lot of staff in our organisation that have had to adapt to working at different services. You know, they're onwards, they're having to wear PPE. So there's an awful lot of adapting for those that are in a clinical role as well. So I just wanted to sort of reflect, you know, change is different for us all, dependent on our circumstances, but that sort of imposter syndrome of feeling like we need to meet a certain expectation can be quite unhealthy, because you can start sort of almost arguing with yourself in your own head. I need to do this, I need to be on, and you know, and that's what Karen's described. So it's, how do we quieten that down and go, hang on a minute, I'm doing a good job, I'm doing my work to the best of my abilities, I'm working in unprecedented circumstances. I know that's been overused, but you know, that is the reality. You're working through a crisis, adapting to things. So I think it's almost, can we give ourselves a little bit of a break, let some pressure out of that balloon, and just go, hang on a minute, no, I am doing well. And it's probably those of us that want to do a very good job that work even harder, because our expectations of ourselves are so high. Micromanaging, I think that's a sensitive conversation, you know, and I have only been micromanaged once, and I won't forget it. But again, you know, we've got different skills in managers and leaders, some that perhaps just need a bit more self-awareness of how that feels for the person that's on the receiving end of that. So it is about big grown-up conversations sometimes, but like I said, give yourself a break sometimes, especially Karen. You're doing a fab job, I'm sure.
Oh, I give myself a break now. It's fab. But yeah, it's we did put a lot of messages and support out there for our staff at either end of that spectrum. So both those scenarios, Sam, around the pressure that they were perhaps putting on themselves, such as in my situation. And I had great support from my, you know, from my line manager and the team, and it was brilliant. And being able to work flexibly and share my circumstances and have those quality conversations with my team and my manager were really important to getting me through like the majority of the changing circumstances and be able to adapt to that change. To support our managers, to support staff remotely, we did a number of things with our colleagues in learning and development and HR to bring some clear messaging and expectations around, you know, what they could offer, how they could work, how they could perhaps look at things differently to support some of the expectations that managers were having to then manage the teams differently because they weren't there to be actually hands-on and working with them in the physical sense anymore. So it was about exploring how we could do those things differently. And a lot of that work is still ongoing as we move forward to new ways of working as the roadmap.
And Helen, do you want to come in with anything?
Yeah, I think your experience as an employee is really influenced by your relationship with your manager and having that trust. And I think inherently people are very trustworthy and they want to do a good job, you know, and they work really hard, whether that's at home still or in the office or on the front line. And I think we're probably, And I know micromanaging is something that is really horrible to deal with, because I like you, Joe, I've been in that situation. But I'm really hoping it's only a smaller percentage of managers that actually show those behaviours. And we've really put an awful lot of work into trying to support our managers around new ways of working, and especially when you're managing a virtual team. And fingers crossed, it's all working really well so far. I know there are those blips, but we try and put as much support in as we can.
And I know that one of our points was supporting managers to be more flexible. How can we do that? I think it's probably worth touching on that now.
Yeah, and I think, similar to what Helen said, we've put an awful lot of work in with our OD teams, HR, the importance of team and how to sort of think about your team and the circumstances. So I suppose really what we're trying to get is that sort of humanistic approach to leadership and that compassionate approach, looking at the circumstances, knowing your team, knowing who needs to work how, and finding your own place in that. I always liken sort of managing a team to a little bit like conducting an orchestra. If you know your sort of instruments and who's on them, you'll know who can play what to the best of their ability, and the ones you need to keep an eye on. And again, from a well-being perspective, not having direct contact but watching people through schemes. How do we pick up where somebody's struggling a little bit? What can we notice that would, normally we'd see that hand to hand, face to face, but we're sort of, again, that isolation, people who are sort of feeling withdrawn and not engaging. There's a lot on managers at this moment in time, I think, for their own well-being and trying to manage that of others. Sorry, Sam, I don't know if I've fully answered your question, but I know I sort of went a little bit there. But
and just out of interest then, do you think that managers in senior positions especially are reluctant to talk about their own well-being as well, or not?
Some are and some aren't. I think it's there's a lot of sort of, we're still trying to chip away at that stigma around well-being. I mean, it needs people to speak up and say, yeah, I struggle from time to time. And as we know, we've all got mental health. It fluctuates under different circumstances and different days, different moods. And sort of senior people, they're no different to the rest of us. But I think there's a little bit of when you become senior, there's a little bit more of that, I need to be this way. I need to be strong. I'm leading. I need to show. So, there is some strength in vulnerability. And being able to sort of admit that in a positive way. And I think that's what we need around mental health is that sort of normality of it. Of course, it's normal to feel pressured when you've got family, you've got work, you've got kids, we're in a pandemic. That would be normal. So stress to a certain extent is normal, and that anxiety. But how do we manage it? How do we notice it and control it and sort of find ways that mean it doesn't escalate? So that's really what I said. Like I say, I'm passionate about that. How can we prevent a little bit and be self-aware?
Yeah.
And that goes for everybody.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Joe. It's a big passion of mine, and one of the things that we're hoping to sort of ride the crest of the wave, really, that the pandemic's given us is it's actually pushed well-being to the right under everybody's noses. Mental health and well-being is it's got a big spotlight on it, and certainly from Lancashire's point of view and from our well-being points of view, we're looking to build on some really good people managers and really good ideas and practice that we currently have, and develop an organisation that has wellbeing at the heart of what it does, from recruitment to onboarding to induction to supervision to peer support to providing the right support in the right way at the right time for our staff and our workforce, and therefore rippling that out to the people of Lancashire. Because for everybody that's part of our team, they're a member of a community and a family. Absolutely. And there's wider connections out there to be made. So we want to bring that in and really embrace well-being, as well as becoming more trauma informed. And I think that with more of a person-centered style adaptation to developing our teams and relationships, these quality conversations can be had, and we can become more proactive in the way that we're supporting people with the well-being, rather than reacting to issues once they've happened, which we are very good at, but we want to get better at.
I would say we're on the same page, Karen. That's the approach that we're taking within the trust. Wellbeing is everybody's business. Again, the ability to have that, ask people how they are, to be comfortable with it, that should be happening throughout. And we have noticed through the pandemic that we have more and more of us have got it. So we need to keep that momentum and, like you say, focus on that preventative approach. And that's definitely where our focus is at Lancashire and South Cumbria Care. Yep.
Helen, do you want to come in with anything?
I don't think I could say it any better than Karen and Joe just did.
So just to go, we touched on it very briefly before, and it's something that I'd like to go back to in regards to the impact that it's had on relationships. I know, Karen, you said at the start you was bickering a little bit, which I'm sure we've all done. I know for many people that working from home has had a dramatic impact on the relationships, either with the children or the partners. What advice have you got to those individuals to try and improve those relationships at home? Because, it does get stressful being with someone permanently. As much as you love your children or your partner, being with them 24/7 is hard.
Is it? It's not natural.
No. And what can people do? Because I know from talking to staff, some individuals are concerned that their relationships may crumble because of this. What advice can we give them to hopefully improve the relationships and to ensure that they're having time for themselves as well?
Yeah, it's an interesting point you make there, Sam, and it's something that picked up on one of my breaks that I allowed myself watching daytime TV.
Bargain on, come on, chuck it in there.
I'm not going to promote any program. However, it was picked up as a topical debate discussion around sort of the impact on relationships and the increase in divorce and people contacting organisations such as Relate. To try and sort of rebuild some of the difficulties that they were having. Certainly from my perspective, I think communication's the key. I think you've got to talk, you've got to have those open and honest conversations. And if you've got children, you've got your conversation you're going to have with your partner, whoever whoever the other adults are in the house. But you can have that conversation with them and then at some point come together as a family and look at, how is it feeling for everybody? What do people need some help with? What would they like to do? And try and build in some of that. It sounds very idealistic. And in an ideal world, we'd be all like making cakes and going for walks together and it'd be joyous and happy all the time, which it isn't. But it's about just having those conversations and actually really listening to each other and trying to meet each other halfway, I think is what worked for us.
The thing with a lot of those
I've never been more excited about my husband going fishing.
You can go for the week.
Off you go. Of course you can go, love. There's your stuff. Take it.
I've packed your bag. Yeah.
I think boundaries are very much at the heart of all of this, both in the home and with relationships in work. And the thing is, boundaries have always been kind of set organically just by the process, But everyone who's anyone who's gone from a relationship of where you're dating and you're living in separate houses to then when you actually first live together has experienced that shift in boundaries that automatically happens. It goes from, I play my Xbox when I'm not on a date, and she goes and sees her friends when she's not on a date. But then once you're in the house, it's like, now we're suddenly expected to be in each other's company. And if I want to go and play my Xbox, do I actually have to ask for permission for that and stuff? And we never have these conversations. But the thing with any boundaries... We
didn't sign up for it, did we?
No, exactly. It's like, we don't sit down and go, right, now that we're going to move in together, I want to allocate our time specifically using this timesheet over here. But the thing is, we actually do need to have those type of conversations, maybe not like that, because ultimately, if you don't... People avoid having those conversations because it's uncomfortable. But the thing is, you're going to get the discomfort. If you don't have a conversation about boundaries, if your boss is suddenly expecting you to work the extra 2 hours that you used to commute, and that you're not okay with that, but you've kind of said yes to kind of not rock the boat for the first few weeks, they're going to expect that of you forever. And if you don't challenge that boundary, eventually what's going to happen is you're going to become resentful for it. So instead of having the pain and discomfort of actually having to approach your boss in the short term or your partner and say, look, I just want to go and watch Homes Under the Hammer on my own, all right? It's like, we had that conversation because my wife loves having breaks. I can't stand breaks because as soon as my train of thought gets taken off, it takes me forever to get it back on. So I like breaking when I need to break, rather than it's lunchtime, so we break. It's the middle of the afternoon, so we break, and it's different for different people, but you need to have those conversations, because otherwise the friction that you're trying to avoid in the short term, it's coming. It's just coming, like when you're resentful of the fact that they keep interrupting me. Anyway, I'll put myself back on mute now.
No, carry on, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we work now the way we work. We've gone from the dining room table where, I was looking at her going, you crunch that carrot any louder, I may have to do harm. to you're in your room, I'm in my room. You have your breaks, I'll have my breaks, but you can bring me a coffee, that would be lovely, thank you very much. And then try and not beat yourself up over it when things don't work or you have a bad day. Just start again the day after. I mean, working the way we've worked over the last 12 months, there's no rule book for it. There's no guidance on how we actually do it individually. Everybody is different, and you two different personalities working in a very small space together. There are going to be occasions where there's a bit of conflict, but it's not beating yourself up over that. That's not got anything to do with why you fell in love or your marriage or the people in your household. That's just the situation that you're in, and it's working out how to separate yourself a little bit. Like, yes, go fishing, yes, play your guitar, yes, go out for a walk with your friend, yes, take the dog out, he really needs to go. I mean, our dog, bless him, he's been walked so much, he's a Great Dane, he's going to be a Dachshund by the time we've finished. Just to get some of that individual space from each other. And there's no one size fits all.
No, and I think that's absolutely true. And I'm lucky. I've got a relatively solid relationship, and again, we want to reflect that there different people have got different circumstances. And again, if things weren't great, and then there's been other pressures, then people might need some extra support, like you say, from a late or mental health support from charities. These have tested people's relationships. I mean, for me, similar stuff to you ladies and gentlemen, in that, it's like, I don't want to hear about your stresses because I've got my own. Don't start coming into my bedroom and telling me what's going on with Steve and what you've just talked about. And again, that walking and that separation, and it's been a negotiating. But the one thing I would say, it's great to talk, but sometimes it's about picking the right time to do that when you're not heated, when you're not stressed, because that can just maybe escalate to an argument. You're far better if you can do it. Sometimes I find I bottle it a little bit just to hold on to it till I find the right time. But that suits my personality, that I sometimes need to reflect on what's going on, what's been said, what he's doing, and how things are, to then go, what's going on for him? Why is he behaving like that? Let's have a conversation maybe at the end of the day. Sometimes we just sit down on the end of the settee and go, how was your day? And we're just across the landing to each other. But sometimes that's what we've done. But it is, it's how we find what works for us. All our relationships are unique and need navigating in a certain way, I would say sometimes.
Dave, you've come off mute, so I'm presuming that you want to come in.
Ooh,
He's coming back.
Look at you noticing things. Oh, mine and Sam's relationship's never been better. No, all I was going to say is we've been thrust into a position both in work and at home where the quantity of time has increased. So we've got more time at home. The quantity of time around our families, our partners, our children has increased. But also the time at work is actually, the quantity of that time has gone up, but what's going on with the quality of it? It's like, and this is when we were talking about bosses and managers before, there's a very big difference between being busy and being productive. There's a very big difference between being at work and how much work you get done. And we do focus very much on, well, when we were in the office, it was like, well, you're in from 9 to 5. So, at least at the end of the day, I've done a day's work. It's like, no, you've done a day at the office. It's like, we were never really technically judged on what we were getting done in that time. It was just whether you're there. And the same as what you're saying before, if a person's available for that amount of time, like I want to be available 100% of the time, it's like, really, I think that the conversation needs to do more between, well, actually, what are you doing with those hours? It's like, because if you are getting that piece of work that needs to be done that morning done, and then cool, have the extra, have a 90-minute lunch break, get away from the desk. But no one, as you said before, was questioning that if you went to make a cup of tea and you happened to be out there for 10 minutes because you were in the office, therefore you were working because you were at work. But the same with, family. Like my wife said to me last night, she's like, we're not spending any time together. I'm like, what you on about? We're spending absolutely tons of time together. And she's like, yeah, but we've not done any of this. And I was just like, and it was all stuff that we did before lockdown. So obviously none of it can be redone now. But it's a case of, okay, what are you spending that time doing? I see my wife now more than ever, but because we're both working from home, we may see each other more, but that doesn't mean that we're having the same sort of conversation that we would have before when literally brain switches off from that work mode. And now you have that deep conversation where neither one of you is just checking the work emails and all that kind of stuff. It's like, maybe it's actually a case of, reduce the quantity and actually increase the quality.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree with myself and my husband had a similar conversation about, I'm like, we're not seeing each other. We're not being together. And he's like, we're here all the time. It's like, of course I'm sat here. And I say, yeah, I can see you, but you're not with me. There's no connection there. So it's about building in those connections, really. It's that quality rather than the quantity of time, like you said.
I'd also just quickly like to touch on, there's some people that are working from home that haven't got anybody. And many of those individuals are really struggling with loneliness and isolation. What advice can we give them to ensure that they feel connected to people? Anyone can come in.
Okay, it's a really, really difficult one. Is that because it's about, it was really hard, I think, initially for the initial lockdown where nobody could see anyone. That was before they introduced the support bubbles for people. So that I can only imagine there was only so much time somebody who chooses to sort of live on their own or might have found themselves living on their own through other circumstances can fill the time doing something before they need that actual physical human interaction. So I think that was the most challenging and difficult part. And as colleagues and certainly through work, we tried our best to engage people and make sure that there was some sort of, I know it was a virtual conversation, but rather than have that on the phone, we'd do it this way so we could see each other and have the sort of the as much as this can be a physical connection, but at least you can see one another and see how somebody's feeling and talk face to face and read some of the cues that people might be giving you. I think the introduction of the support bubbles perhaps supported some of that, so people were then able to link in, and as people got used to being socially distanced from people, physical distance, I prefer to call it rather than social. I think it gives it a different feel to say socially distant, because we can still be socially connected in a virtual sense. So, but that physical distancing, but as people got better about it, then, people's groups and hobbies and things started to become online so they could join in and do things that way. But I think essentially what I would say to somebody who's feeling lonely and isolated is to reach out, to actually say something, because people make assumptions that if you don't say anything that you're actually okay. And it's really important for you to I would encourage somebody to sort of look at what their options are, have that conversation. Where can we get those connections? Are they in work? What hobbies do you have? How can you connect in with those virtually? How often can you build in, some time outside with another person walking at a safe distance? Until the time that we can meet in our gardens again, which hopefully will be around Easter. Can't wait. Got a bar in my garden.
Oh,
love it.
You know where we're going.
So
watch bargain on.
But I think it's about sort of looking. The main thing is for that person to sort of reach out and actually say, no matter who they go to with that, but actually say, this is how I am feeling. and ask for that support, because we do make assumptions about people that they're okay.
Yeah.
Because they're not saying otherwise sometimes.
I was going to say, Sam, I mean, I when you take it in it's sort of core that if somebody doesn't have contact with family for whatever reason, or doesn't have family and is low on friends, that work might be the only point of contact.
Yeah.
So I suppose those sort of catch-ups in work, those little sort of, I would say, informal meetings, and we've done quite a lot of that in the organisation, is just encouraging people to check. We call them check-ins. We've even done things in our team where we've shared family photographs. We've laughed about things. We've got together with no work agenda, if you like. So that's one avenue for people. But I suppose we must always remember there are people that are under the radar that, as much as we would want them to be part of a network, take part in something like the Recovery College, activities, sort of charities that are trying to bring people together around isolation and loneliness. Some people are really hesitant about coming forward because it's not their thing. I suppose it's really hard sometimes to spot those people that are just under that radar. I suppose all we can do is be mindful, understand that, and sort of be aware of maybe people that we do have contact with or are local to us in the community that might be of concern. And like Karen says, as sort of restrictions lighten up a little bit, maybe we will come out of this thinking a little bit more about how people have gone through different experiences in different circumstances, and what that's actually been like for some people. It's been extremely tough. We've all got a story to tell, haven't we? But that connection of community. But some people, enjoy, maybe just don't want it, and we've got to respect that. But until we know, we can't be quick to say, oh, join this, do that. We can only suss it out almost and try and nudge and encourage. Sometimes I remember being told about somebody who wanted to join a book club, but it wasn't about books. It was just about being with other people. I don't think the guy ever read a book, but he just wanted to be there. You know what I mean? So it is that little bit of a little bit mindful of others and maybe where they're at. But it's a two-way thing to find that out. Yeah.
Dave's off mute again, so I'm presuming he's coming in.
All I was going to say is that Twitch and live streaming's been one of the biggest kind of community things for me. In terms of social media, like having a community on there, it's been unparalleled, because over social media you don't ever feel connected to the other people in the comments section. But in Twitch, which is where we originally hosted this, there was people that actually become friends through those communities. But what a lot of people have said about our shows that we've done over the past year is, they put it on and it's like having the office background noise there again, like having a conversation going on with people like what we're doing right now. There could be some people that are watching right now that have literally got this on while they're getting on with the rest of their day, because it's that background noise. And now we're so used to kind of like the only one noise that we've got being whatever we actually produce. But you can actually lurk in a stream like here on YouTube or on Twitch and not say anything and just have ideas being talked about in the background, or you can actually engage with them through the chat box. And I know a lot of people over the last year, it's not a very commonly accessed thing, because we see social media as this kind of disconnect thing, and I found that live streaming really does tend to connect people.
Cheers, Dave. So
can I just come in there? I think
of course.
There is no one size fits all. Everybody is an individual, and whether they're feeling lonely or whether they want to connect or perhaps are happy not connecting, it's around being mindful that that's the case and there isn't one size fits all answer for people, and putting those opportunities out there for people to connect in. So whether that's having a virtual brew room at work, which is just a social event, whether you do some sort of virtual activities like we did the NC 500 virtual walk challenge, because everyone can, or most people can get out and have a little walk, or even in their own back garden. And whether it's doing those things that people can choose to join in with if they want to, and being mindful of that.
Thanks, Helen. So there's 2 points that I'd like to talk about before we open up to the chat box. So people are going to be really anxious about, or they have been really anxious about the changes that have happened, or they're anxious about returning to work. Dave, I'd like you to come in on this as well, if that's okay. We have got a full webinar on anxiety, so you can find that on the Mental Health Family Hour. But has anyone got any sort of advice on how people can reduce those anxieties? Because I know already from talking to staff that are people that are feeling anxious about coming back to the office. So how can people sort of deal with that?
I think, Sam, I mentioned it when we sort of started, that it's that transition. So it's that movement again, that we're going to go through something, and it's natural to have that up and that down and come back through the other side. And for some of us, it'll take a little bit longer time, because we're very sensitive to our environment, and we've got used to working at home. For some of us, we've got used to how things are, and then we're going to go through an experience of change again, where things will feel uncomfortable. We'll need to suss it out again. We'll need to settle with it, and that is a normal thing. So I would say, again, if you can sit with that sort of unsettled period and just a little bit of curiosity, it's new, it's different, and feel safe until we sort of feel those feelings again. It's almost like sensing it. We will need to get back up to settled again. So I think just be mindful that that's what we all will go through, and it's just to what extent you're feeling that. Mm.
Dave's took his mute off again.
Well, you did say you wanted my opinion on this.
Yeah, no, I do.
There's two things, and I'll try and be quick on them, because obviously I want to give as much time to our guests. But number one is that no one ever gets anxious over the best case scenario. So anyone that's anxious, we're all, as Joanne just said, we are all going through this, but some of us can't wait to get into the garden gin bar, and others of us are actually, terrified about that idea. And generally speaking, it's because what we're looking forward to, what we're visualizing up here, some of us are seeing, like, I don't know, college party movie where we're all there together and it's great and we're having a great old time and we're getting back the things that we've been missing. Other people are seeing being close to people, being uncomfortable around it. I've got social anxiety, so I know that when I've not had to deal with many social situations over the last year, I only deal with my social anxiety by regularly dealing with social situations. So I'm well out of practice now. So there's elements of that. There's elements of contact contamination and things like that. There are people that have got health anxiety that are worried about those things. Generally speaking, an anxious mind is thinking about what's the worst that could happen in this situation. And if that is this case, I'll treat my social anxiety as this: what's the worst that could happen for me? Right, well, I get out there, I panic, I'm feeling low, people start pointing out that I'm not my usual self, then I start panicking more, and then by about an hour in, I don't want to be there and I cause a scene and run home. This has actually happened in the past, so therefore I know that can actually happen. Now, literally talking about it then has just made me anxious. Right, instead, what am I going to do? Okay, I like to be the life and soul of the party. I'm socially anxious, but I like to be the life and soul of the party. It's a whole mess, I know. But, okay, what's that going to look like? What I'm going to do, first thing I'm going to do, if I am socially anxious that day, I'm going to tell my friends. I'm going to say to them, look, if I'm a little bit off tonight, that's why. I'm feeling socially anxious. It's been a year. So if I'm not myself, then this is why. That immediately gives me permission to feel whatever I'm feeling and to act however I'm acting. Now I'm not worried about it, but I'm also going to visualize seeing myself in that situation, chatting, having fun, like the best time, remembering one of the best social experiences I've ever had. And if I see that and start seeing that now, look, you can probably tell from even my mannerisms, the anxiety's coming down, and now I'm excited to move towards it. The same thing there is, like, if you think about the worst case scenario, you're putting it on in a cinema up here, you're watching the horror movie, you're feeling scared. If you think about the best case scenario, you're watching the romantic comedy with the happy ending up here, and as a result, you're feeling excited. You're feeling like you want to go focus on what you want to move towards rather than what you want to try and get away from. Is the easiest way to say it. And in fact, actually, in terms of adapting to change, focus on what you can do, not what you can't do, is a kind of good kind of side note on all of that. The second thing I wanted to mention is that it's going to be very common for workplace anxiety. It's not really been so much of a thing that we've talked about in the past, but there's been a lot of people in the chat that have said that actually they've enjoyed working from home. They don't want to go back to the office, or at least they want a staggered approach. I would very much want to encourage both employers and employees to actually go for this staggered approach. Because the thing is, as I said before, my social anxiety was kept under wraps by a controlled amount of social events, which my wife had all the way up here, whereas I would prefer to have it down there. We agreed on somewhere around here. It was good. It was still anxiety ridden, but it was good, and it kept me sharp in those situations. And as I said, I've not been kept sharp in that situation for the last year. So the same with yourself. If you found it hard to go into the office, and as soon as work from home came up, you were like, this is nice, that's good for you in the short term. It's not necessarily good for you in the long term, because it'll probably shrunk your comfort zone, which means the idea of going back to the office now, especially full time, might be terrifying. It might be hard for you to go back to the office one day, whereas before you could do 5 days a week, and that's perfectly okay. But this is the reason I think that we should be actually exercising both the skill of working from home and the skill of working with an office, because sooner or later on the business calendar, there's going to come a work conference, a Christmas party, some reason that you've all got to be there at the same time. And if you've had, 1 day a week, 2 days a week throughout the course of the year, testing that comfort zone, you're going to be okay with those situations. There'll still be a struggle because you've got anxiety, so of course they will. But if you work from home 100% of the time, chances are you're not going to want to turn up to that conference. You're not going to want to turn up. That conference is going to be so far outside your comfort zone. So employers, be aware that this is going on with your staff, please, and make arrangements for it. Employees, be aware this is going on, and that your inclination is going to be, well, I don't ever want to go back to the office again. And then again, have that conversation, find the middle ground, find what is right. And the phrase "there's no one size fits all" has come up both on screen and in the chat box a whole bunch of times today, and that is so true. You might have to have, if you've got 10 employees, you might have to have 10 different conversations. You might have to find 10 different solutions. That's okay. It's going to test your abilities as a manager. It's good. It's good for your personal development, managers. Right, I'm shutting up now.
No, damn it, Dave. That's exactly why I didn't want you on mute anymore. So if you've got any questions, can you start putting them into the chat box, please? So basically, just to sort of end our conversation, can you just sort of offer some signposting advice in regards to what is available for staff in regards to supporting their own well-being? That would be fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, we have something that's open to the public sector that's called the Resilience Hub. That was sort of based, it was a concept that came out of the Manchester bombings. We've replicated those across the country, but that's something for all public sector and NHS staff. We've got some contact details. I'm sure, Sam, you can get out to people if they want that information. Again, phone helplines, all those types of things. There's apps out there. There's lots of places to go to. But I think it's a little bit a case of, and for us, we have employee assist programs. We've got occupational health. Again, we do stuff sort of, teamwork and stuff to keep people supported. It is about finding out sometimes what works for you. Do you want to talk? Do you want to engage online? Do you want a listening service? Or do you need some support? The Resilience Hub is acting as a sort of triage and a filter and signposting people to sort of self-support or to more engaging sort of therapies if that's what's needed. We've got our Minds Matters services. The Trust offers an awful lot of those types of interventions. I would just say, do something, speak up. I think Karen said it ages ago, ask for help in whatever way you want to do. It might not be from the people around you because you want something quiet and personal, but Samaritans, we know those people are they're there. It might take a little bit of time to find the right sort of help for you, but at least take that one step forward.
Yeah. Thanks, Joe. Yeah. Helen or Karen, do you want to come in?
The Hub of Hope is a really good resource because you get access then to the resources that are available in your locality by your postcode. So that's a really good one to use. Again, I think Joe's covered the main players there in terms of the Resilience Hub and Minds Matter. The Mind website I find really useful, plenty of information and support on there. Information for children and families, Parent Talk, Family Lives, really, really good source of supports there. I think connecting in with any support that you can get in work. So, you know, I do place some emphasis on our line manager, team, colleague relationships there, because quite often if it's something that you need support within work, they're the person that's going to be able to influence that and support you with some of those changes. We have the employee support team in terms of wellbeing. We also have occupational health. And we have quite a broad outreach into the organisation through wellbeing volunteers within the organisation, so they can connect in and signpost and feed things out and ideas of support to our colleagues across the workforce, and also as a consequence their families, friends and the wider community. But it's as Joe said and Helen said, it's not one size fits all. It's about knowing, about actually being self-aware and knowing that self-care starts with yourself. That's why it's self-care. So looking at what works for you and what's out there, and trying things and being open and honest when you are engaged with a service, rather than drop out of it. Actually have that conversation to say, actually, this doesn't feel right for me, it's not working for me, and then you can do something different. So yeah, that's what I've got.
Karen. Helen, is there anything you'd like to add before we open up to questions or comments at the end?
I think Karen and Joe have probably covered most of those. Sorry, my sound dropped out before, so I don't know if anyone mentioned Every Mind Matters and 1U. They're also a really good place to start for some fantastic signposting and information. Loads of digital apps out there to link in with. As Karen was saying, we have our employee support team within our organisation, and I run our Wellbeing volunteer programme. And that for us, we've seen a bit of a sea change in sort of attitudes towards wellbeing over the last 12 months, and our reach now into our organisation has really developed through that network, and that includes people who are perhaps non-networked as well, so people on our front line that don't always have access to our intranet or information. So it's really about bigging up the peer support, reaching out and being brave if you feel like you need some support. Just do it. Ask somebody. You won't find anybody that's going to say, oh, well, I'm not going to help you. What you'll find is somebody with some empathy who will go out of their way to try and help and support you in any way they can.
Perfect. Thanks, Helen. Dave, shall we have a look at the chat box? Is there any questions or comments?
Just a couple of things in terms of resources as well, because I spoke to Emma from Lancashire Minds Matter on Tuesday. It's not called Minds Matter all around the rest of the country, so it's an IAPT service, IAPT. So if you're within the UK and you want to search for whether there is something like that within your area, look up IAPT. Someone in the chat's mentioned that Hub of Hope does have an app as well, and there are a few people outside of the UK in the chat and stuff at the minute. Checkpoint.org is a resource for finding mental health within your area for practically every country in the world. Not all of them.
I've heard of that one before.
No, it's since we've been attracting a more international audience, Sam. We've had to broaden the net on our resources. We've got a lot of comments and a lot of compliments, should I say, as well, which has been quite nice. There is one question, and I will. It's a little. To me, I don't work with an LCC, so obviously this feels like a little bit of a political question to me. So feel free to say, no comment. But it says, I'd be interested to know thoughts on furlough or lack of for LCC staff.
No comment.
I thought that might be the case.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I apologise, but we won't be going into questions like that. We'll leave that one this time.
But really, it's mostly just compliments. Really, just a huge thank you to all the speakers from me. This is from Emma, Sand and Hesketh. Really excellent session. Deborah Moore said thank you. I'm hoping to work from the office once or twice a week when restrictions ease. Chris Carlson says Chris Carlson was the person that put the idea of homes under the hammer in my head, so we were mentioning more than one show, but thanks, really enjoyed the session, and need to leave, but well done, all very useful. That's the web I direct people to outside the UK. Very careful with some links on UK though, as they are accidentally Australian with Checkpoint.org. That's worth knowing. Okay, so with Checkpoint.org, some of the UK links on there are Australian services, which is Yeah, well, this is the whole thing, is where I suppose when you try and serve everyone, sometimes you end up serving no one. But yeah, no, there's no other questions.
Perfect. So I guess we'll round it up. Just a huge thank you to the three of you for coming on to the webinar today. Really appreciate it. It was very insightful. Is there any comments that you'd like to end on before we finish?
I think just give yourself a break, reflect a little bit on what we've gone through, where you are, what you've achieved, how you have adapted, how you have dealt with the changes and responded, and just take that moment to see what you have got and where you can just sort of build. And if you need help, speak up if you're struggling.
Helen or Karen, anything?
Just to reiterate really what Jo said there, be kind, give yourself some props. You've come through this, you're still going through it, you're surviving it. Give some positive messages to yourself. Actually recognize what's going well, and breathe. You're doing it anyway.
Yeah, absolutely, Karen. And just build in a little bit of time each day for yourself. So whether that's just to sit for 5 minutes with a brew in the garden or in the sunshine, or watch Homes Under the Hammer, or bargain hunt, do something that is just for you.
I have to be honest, I've been really trying to think of how bargain hunt ends. And I was going to try and end the actual webinar with an ending like they do on Bargain Hunt, but it's not coming to my mind. I can't remember what it is. I'm sure they do something with music and a little jump or something at the end.
They do
I can't remember what it is.
They do a little kick.
That's it.
Yes.
I best not do that. I'm in the
No,
office.
no, they do.
I've not got socks on, which could turn could turn this into a bit of a different stream.
Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. Really appreciate your support. Please do share this with your colleagues. It's the same link as the live stream, so please do share it with as many people as possible. So there won't be a webinar next week, but I will be sending out when we're doing the next ones in the next couple of weeks. So they are on bereavement and resilience for the staff hour. We've also got some of the family hour episodes coming up, where we've got ones on alcohol, child sexual abuse, variety of different topics. So please do keep an eye on your emails, and I look forward to speaking to you all soon. And thank you once again to our wonderful guests. So perfect.
Lovely.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you,
Take
Dave.
care, everybody.
No worries.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
The live stream down.